Hi folks, how you doing? It's Max here again, and I've got some bad news and some good news. The bad news is that I can't show you anything to play on the guitar of any import today. The good news is I have got another fantastic video for you, which I think you're going to enjoy and get a lot out of. But why can't I play you anything today? Not being rude, and I will just say one word: hedge cutters. I'm not joking, it was very dangerous, it was very bad. Thank God nothing worse happened than that. I will hopefully, please God, be able to play the guitar again. But in the meantime, I'm not going to waste any of your valuable time. You need to learn, and today I'm going to give you a brief introduction to the various kinds of guitars that exist. What types of guitars? Now, a lot of you are a bit confused by all the various terms that get bandied about. You've got acoustic, you've got electric. Okay, you might think that's fairly straightforward, but then you have electro-acoustic, semi-acoustic, you've got solid electric, you've got Spanish, steel string, 12 string, blah 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 blah. Okay. So I've given you a very brief overview just now, but I'm now going to go through them one by one. First of all, the two main categories of guitars are acoustic and electric. As the name implies, electric needs to be plugged in, and you do that via a guitar lead into an amplifier. So here's an example of an electric guitar, a very, very famous model, the Squire, but this is actually, sorry, the Stratocaster, a Fender Stratocaster, but this is a Squire version, which is a cheaper but pretty respectable version of a very, very famous, groundbreaking and highly popular guitar played by all and sundry, including Hendrix and Clapton. Not this guitar, but similar style. Okay, so this is called an electric. This, on the other hand, is called an acoustic. The basic difference being, if you do this, it's not very loud. If you do this, much louder. Because an electric, you plug in, and then when you plug it in, obviously it can be as loud as you want, depending, only limited by the size of your amplifier and your volume control, which could go all the way up to 11. Okay, now within the family of those two broad types of guitars, we have subcategories. For instance, we have what's called a semi-electric guitar. So I will now explain this type of guitar is a solid electric, okay, and simply called that because of you tap the wood and it's very, very solid. Now that is logical in a way because it gives it a very beefy sound. The only sound that comes is produced really, besides that very low sound there, goes from the pickups. You notice there are these three kind of things with 6 poles on each one. I'm not going to go into the details of all of that, but basically they pick up the sound, as the name implies. The sound gets transferred via the lead, which plugs in at this end to that's the jack plug there. The other end of the lead goes into an amplifier, and then you turn up on here with your volume controls, you turn up on the amplifier. You adjust the pickups with this adjuster here, but they're all details. But this is a solid electric guitar. Okay, only any good if you have an amplifier. Only as good as your amplifier. In fact, you know, possibly the amplifier is more important than the guitar in some ways. But I'm not going to go into contentious points at this stage. So this, if we go back to the acoustic I showed you, this particular acoustic is a steel string acoustic. All right, that's all I'm going to say for the moment. So what variations on these type of electrics and acoustics have we got? Well, since it's tan, I'm going to show you a different type of acoustic. Okay, slightly different, but highly significant in the styles of music played. This, you see the difference besides the design, but the main difference is it's got a bigger body. Although that's not necessarily the big difference, because you can have, you know, acoustics like this, steel strings which have big bodies, but the main difference is that the top 3 strings here are nylon. Okay, the E, the B and the G are nylon strings, and it's got a wider neck generally. This is called a Spanish or a classical guitar, okay, because classical music is played on it, Spanish flamenco music is played on it, and like I say, there are advantages to both and disadvantages, which is why certain styles of music are played on each respectively. So on this, because of the wider neck, you've got a lot more room to move with your fingers, and you can do more intricate stuff with your right hand fingers, and because of the nylon strings it's got a more gentle sound, hence it's more suitable for classical, and this is the traditional acoustic guitar the classical guitarists use. Albeit a very bad, cheap and clapped out one, but it is of that style. Whereas, as I said before, this is steel string, it's got a narrow neck and more suited to folk, country, that sort of style, where you need to be a bit louder and you're playing chords often to accompany yourself or accompany another singer. Now, what other types of electric are there? The main other type of electric, we said the one I showed you before was called a solid electric. So this one is my pride and joy, and this is an example of a semi-electric. Why is it called a semi-electric? It looks pretty electric to at first glance. If you look at the controls, they're all the same. You know, you've got a button there, slightly different design, but that's another switches between the pickups, which are here, same. So basically, you've got obviously the lead going in there, the socket there, which the lead goes into, the other end of which goes into the amplifier, just like the other electric I showed you. But the difference being, you see these holes here, which are sometimes called F holes, similar to a violin, and if you listen to that, it's hollow. Okay, so it's hollow like an acoustic guitar. So this is called a semi-electric. You wouldn't really play it unless you're practicing at home, messing around unplugged, because it's still not at all loud. And the whole point is you plug it in. But it gives it a different sort of sound. It doesn't give it a full-bodied, electric, rocky, screeching sound. This is a type of guitar associated with bands like the Eagles, the Byrds, the Smiths, and that sort of band, which is not such a full-on rocky type of heavy rock, heavy metal type band. Nonetheless, and of course the Beatles. The Beatles played very similar. George Harrison played similar guitar to this, but this is called a semi-electric. Now, there's one other type of guitar which you'll come across, and in a way, it's not much different from an acoustic. But what happens if you want an acoustic sound, but you don't want to be drowned out by the singer or the band, whatever, but you want an acoustic-y sound? So you have, in the old days, you used to mic up an acoustic guitar. So you put a microphone in front of your acoustic guitar, and the microphone would go into the PA system along with the other vocals and other things, and that would give you an amplified sound. But that was a bit restrictive because meant you couldn't move around too much. You had to, be solid and rigid in front of your microphone, not move the guitar at all. Especially bad if you're a singer-guitarist, but that was the way it's done. If you look at old videos on YouTube of Bob Dylan at various festivals, that's what he had to do. and you see Rhodes adjusting the microphone before he plays, all that sort of thing. But it wouldn't be heard of today. I think I'm right in saying it virtually never happens these days, even though some people say you get a purer sound and it captures the acoustic sound better with a microphone. But what 99% of people have today is an electro-acoustic. So this, again, is basically just like the electric I showed you. The semi-electric is basically an electric but hollow, but you have to plug it in. This is basically an acoustic for all intents and purposes, and you can play it unplugged without the lead that goes in here. But if you want to be heard loud and you want it to be louder, then you plug a lead in there and it's louder. You put it into through the amp or the PA system and turn up as loud as you want, and you can compete with the singers and even the drummers. And in many heavy rock bands, it became fashionable in the 80s. Bands like Bon Jovi and Poison and even Guns N' Roses, they'd have their big power ballad amidst all their wonderful screechy heavy rock stuff, but they'd have their big power ballad, and out would come the electro-acoustic, which the guitarist would switch to for wonderful romantic effect in the middle of a set. Okay, now we've nearly covered everything. There's actually another version, and I actually do have plugged in fact, another type of electroacoustic. If you remember at the beginning I told you, or near the beginning I told you, there are two types of acoustic. There are the Spanish guitar and there's the steel string for pop, country and folk, and the nylon string for classical and flamenco stroke Spanish. Here is what, to all intents and purposes, is a Spanish guitar, or a classical guitar. If you look again, the neck is wider. There is one feature which I'm going to tell you about which isn't so traditionally Spanish or classical. But again, this one is an electro Spanish guitar. If you see here, there are controls where you can turn up the volume, which I'm about to do. And you can hear it nice and loud, etc. Because it's plugged in and it goes through into an amplifier which goes through to a speaker. Okay, so electroacoustics aren't just confined to rock bands. If you're a budding Spanish player, flamenco player, or for that matter classical player, you might want to be non-traditional and plug yourself in to make yourself loud. Okay, I'm going to tell you about one more type of guitar that you'll come across, and this is not really to do with the fact whether it's acoustic or electric or semi-acoustic or electroacoustic or whatever. It's to do with the number of strings. Yes, you've probably heard about this, if I can see where I put it, but another fantastic variation in the guitar family is the 12-string guitar. 12 strings, you might think that's ridiculous. How can you get them all on? How wide must the neck be? Well, not as wide as you think, because although they're 12 strings, they're really 6 double strings. So if you look closely, you can see here that there are 6 pairs of strings. And it's not as complicated as it sounds. It's not like you've got 12 different notes instead of 6 different notes. What you've got is a pair of notes there which are exactly the same, a pair of notes here which are exactly the same, and here, starting from the G string, you've got a note, a normal G string, and an octave above it, and then the same with all the next. Okay, so that's where you get the 12 from. They are, it has to be said, a nightmare to tune. You would want to have them as tuned as much as possible before picking them up at a gig, and hopefully, you know, you have a roadie do that for you so that there's no time for it to go out of tune. Very difficult to tune. Often the strings snap because there's a lot of tension on them, but a fantastic sound which I can't really demonstrate because of that. But I hope you found this video useful. It's basic information. Some of you might have known a fair bit of it before, but I hope it's cleared up a few confusing things about the nomenclature of guitars. Not a bad word for the end of the day on a Sunday. Is it Sunday? Yes, Sunday. And may the 6th go with you. Is it the 6th? I don't know. Anyway, hopefully by the next time I'm with you, this will be more like this, and I'll be able to show you a few things on the guitar. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you do like it. Thanks a lot. I'm Max, and good night.